You're listening to Akomplish Radio from Akomplish.com. It's a safe space with cuddle pets and hipster haircuts. Okay, not really. From productivity to business strategy and market insights, there's something for every business leader and entrepreneur. Hipster haircut or not. Sorry, no cuddle pets though. We do have to draw the line somewhere. Welcome to the show.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Akomplish Radio, the show that is not radio. It's kind of like the modern equivalent to radio, but except for with video. So whatever that makes it, here we are, and it is a beautiful day in the middle of quarantine. It has been literally years since I've done an episode. That's where we're at today. Let me just make sure this mic is working for me. All right. That's where we're at today, and but I am happy to be back, and what better reason to kick it back off finally than a global pandemic, as I always say. So today, I want to talk a little bit about and share some thoughts that I've been having in regards to our productivity. Obviously, this is the point here. Akomplish Radio is discussing productivity, and especially for business owners and entrepreneurs. And right now, I coach and focus a lot with business owners around the country, especially in the U.S., in Canada. And right now, it's interesting to see the reaction. And this is a reaction to some semi-unique scenario, but reaction to kind of recessionary crisis in general as well is interesting to watch. And understandable in most of it. I mean, it's, of course, we're humans and things are difficult, and none of us like the unknown. And what is more unknown than a pandemic that we haven't seen in the likes of in 100 years? So it's obviously an unknown thing where we're all reacting in interesting ways. But a couple observations. I was working with a client here today, and we were talking about the process of and the routines and rhythms that he has been in or trying to get into to work more with his team, to focus on their core, alignment and culture. And because of COVID-19, it's all just kind of gone out the window, and they've had to focus on these other things and everything else. And what I found interesting when we got to talking was it's just a classic struggle and challenge of the urgent versus the important. And how easy it is to throw the important out the window when the urgent tends to flare its head to a greater degree. And especially if we've got a good excuse to do it. I mean, there's always something urgent, but you have a pandemic. So, of course, we need to throw out the important and focus on the urgent and just put out some fires. And there's a level of truth to that. But what was interesting to me is that, he was letting go of so much progress in order to kind of right the ship a little bit. And not even so much that, because it wasn't even that the ship was sinking. I mean, it wasn't even something to that degree, and he's ignoring a sinking ship. I mean, there's definitely a reaction to that, but a lot of it is just reactionary measure to a condition that we're in that for many businesses, not all, but many have not yet felt the full repercussions of. Meaning, we don't know how this is going to affect everybody. There are some businesses that are very obviously directly being impacted, and there's many others that are kind of business as usual, maybe a little bit down. But it's not even that we're being forced into these urgent things. It's like because of the situation, we just tend to jump on those. Like, I just want to deal with this instead of other components. And the point of all this was not that he shouldn't deal with the urgent at all, but it really drove home the reality of how sacrosanct the time must be for you on your calendar to focus on the important as well, to play the long game, especially right now, where it's very easy to forget about the long game. And we talked a little bit about that. I want to see where the rubber meets the road and where there's real results. And it basically is this allusion to, I don't have time for the fluffy stuff. I need to focus on the real gritty stuff. But it's not fluff. That's what's interesting, is so much what we were working on with this culture and everything else was the root of his biggest challenges and problems. And so it isn't fluff at all, but what it is not the return on the investment there it's a long play. I often give this analogy, and I'm not even going to try to attribute it, but somebody can leave in the comments where the attribution is. But basically this analogy of two people trying to get water to a village that's miles away from its water source. And one grabs a couple of buckets and just starts huffing, man, and he's delivering water, delivering water to this village. And the other one lays out a plan and starts to build a pipeline. And for the first 3 months, the guy with the buckets he's miles ahead, man. He's delivered so much water, and he's just jamming along, making some money, doing his thing. And he's looking at the other guy like, man, you are just spinning your wheels. Look at all the money I'm making. And finally, the pipeline, of course, turns on, and the equation is flipped 100-fold almost instantly. And that is what the long game is about. The long game and focusing on these bigger, important issues is about that 100x that we're looking for. It's about the growth that is basically unavailable to us altogether right now because of certain limitations. And focusing on that is going to yield so much higher return. So what can you do about it? In a time like this, what do we do? As I mentioned, one of the pieces is to have sacrosanct on your calendar time to focus on the long game. And we call it often like the business power hour or something like this, where it's basically time to think about the bigger picture strategy versus the reactionary issues of the day, if you will. And just to carve out a couple hours a week to dig into those issues and turn it into, like meditative time, meaning you're going to turn off everything else. Fires don't exist. Employees can't contact you, whatever it is. Disruption is off limits, and you're going to really focus on something outside of the urgent for a moment and just focus on the important. And that is what, and so that's the first, I guess, suggestion is just carve a little bit of time out on your calendar. And that way, 90% of the time can be urgent fire, putting out whatever you need to do. But then you've got at least a couple hours a week to really dig in and think about the long game. And it doesn't mean that won't change. The long game and what you dig into may change because of circumstances like a recession, meaning you're still planning a strategy. And it may not be 5 years out. Right now, it might be 6 months out or 12 months out. But you're exploring the next step direction maybe after all of this is over. Maybe once the recession kind of levels out and we really know the impact or whatever it might be. You're just really trying to look at that component and step out of the business a little bit for a few minutes to be able to focus on these bigger pieces. And so that's the first suggestion is just to have your business power hour there. Another suggestion, I'm going to give 3, all right? Another suggestion is related to a business habit we call the weekly roundup. And so the weekly roundup is basically time once a week to review your calendar, to review progress, and to set your coming week. So generally it ends up falling usually it's either a Friday or a Sunday. So you take a couple of minutes, before the week kicks off or right as the week is ended to review your week, see how things went. Like how did the week go according to plan? Were you able to focus on important as well as urgent? As well as like overall progress, what were our numbers and these sorts of things. Just kind of looking at your progress, both systemically as well as actual like goal achievement and things achievement-wise. But then you look forward and plan the next week. So it is a great opportunity. And one of the key facets of this whole thing of the weekly roundup is to have in mind like your quarterly goals. Like what is it that we're trying to achieve this quarter? What is our quarterly focus? Even better than goals. And then you can use your weekly roundup to ensure that the actions you are taking are moving the needle, or the actions you're planning, are moving the needle towards that bigger quarterly goal. And that's one of the big pieces here is making sure that we're not just spinning our wheels with whatever is urgent. And the squeaky wheel is not always the most important one. Some wheels can squeak just fine for years, but they do end up getting the grease, right? So we want to avoid that where we're wasting our grease on squeaky wheels that don't matter and focusing on those that are going to actually move the vehicle forward in a productive way in towards those kind of quarterly objectives and focus points. So we have those beacons out there. As Rich Christensen says in the zigzag principle, you have the beacon in the fog that's setting your direction. It doesn't actually reveal the entire path, but it sets your direction. And we want to make sure that our actions are steps in that direction. And so we use that during the weekly roundup. And during times like this, often that direction may have changed significantly, in fact. So your quarterly target needs to adjust to accommodate the new reality. And even if it's mid-quarter, I mean, adjust it. Like, this is something that's unexpected, at least for most of us. You know, a lot of us were sticking our heads in the sand on this whole thing, and so we need to adjust and just make sure that we've got a new target, and then utilize that target during our weekly roundup to assess our actions and make sure that we are actually making progress in the right places, and potentially to guide what we're going to focus on during this business power hour, where we focus on the important and step back from the business day-to-day for a moment. So that's suggestion number 2. So we've got get a business power hour to just really carve out some critical time during your week to focus on the important and the long game and that sort of thing. And also the second one is set your weekly roundup. Start doing that on a religious scale to ensure you're kind of regrouping and refocusing and staying agile with your time and efforts. And also, this is beautiful because it shows you the progress you've made. And really, the weekly roundup is about, when you review your week in arrears, that it's not like always the progress specifically that was made, but did you actually follow the plans and go through the motions and get the things done that you needed to? Were your inputs where you wanted them, and then reward yourself for that. Because we can't always control the outputs, right? I mean, some of those outputs include other decision makers and other things like that. We can explore those things, but are we at least putting in our efforts in the right ways, and what did that look like? So those are the first 2. And the final suggestion was actually given by Mike Michalowicz, who wrote his most recent work, is Fix This Next. You can actually see the little hat behind me if you're watching the video. As we work directly with Mike with Fix This Next to incorporate those concepts into the coaching that we do over here. But regardless, he gave a great suggestion he gave it for this specific kind of scenario, so the recession and things. And it's basically when you're creating your to-do list to have this 10-2 ratio. And the 10-2 ratio is basically for every 10 items that you've got on there that are more urgent, that are squeaky wheels and stuff that's happening and clients that need contacted and whatever fires you're trying to put out. For every 10 that you put on there, you've got to make sure there's at least 2, or that you add 2, and whether it's 2 out of 10 or 10 and 2, whatever you want to call it or however it works. But regardless, the concept here is 2 have to be long game objectives, long game tasks, so that you can still make a little bit of progress and not forget or lose the progress you've made, let alone forget your longer plans, but just kind of making sure that you're still leaving room for the long game. So for every 10 random items that come on your to-do list, you've at least got 2 that are long game, that are strategic, that are the important over the urgent, that sort of thing. And so I thought that was a great, extremely simple concept, is just to look at your list and make sure there's at least 20% of your items, 10 to 20% that are actually long game, strategic, move the needle, down the road as well, 6 months to a year down the road, as opposed to just the next, immediate month or 2. So those are the big 3 suggestions that I have, and not saying that they're all super easy, but all of them are intended to be basically habit style. Just go through those motions. No one's asking you to write fantastic prose and triple your revenue during a downtime or whatever it might be, albeit I hope that happens. But usually when these things happen, we need to come back to basics and just, okay, what are the inputs that I need to put in place to make sure that we make progress in the right ways, that we're addressing the immediate issues that are real without forgetting the long-term plan. And even the long-term plan, like taking the time there to adjust that and be agile with that. Because in any sort of recession or crisis or whatever, there is always opportunity. A lot of it, in fact. And I don't mean that in any sort of weird, greedy sense. I mean, there is just opportunity to serve. And if you create a business product or service that fills a need that has risen, you are doing a service to the economy. And of course, you'll benefit from that. So there's opportunity to have your eyes open to those other opportunities and not simply try to keep everything on life support, but some of those long game activities might be what new stuff, or how could we adjust a few of our products or services to address these new opportunities or what's really happening in the space. So that's part of it, is just having your eyes open during this whole game and then accommodating those things into this long-term, short-term play that you're making. So that is the nuts and bolts of today's episode. Once again, I am glad to be back, and I wanted to just share a couple of those thoughts with you today. Expect to see and hear more from me, both audio in the podcast as well as video and on YouTube and otherwise. Some of these will be streamed live, just so you're aware, and we're excited to kind of finally get back into the groove. And yeah, here we are. So this is Billy Bush signing off for Akomplish Radio.
Thanks for listening to Akomplish Radio from Akomplish.com. Now, get out and accomplish something great.